hello, and welcome to another edition of Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, where Team Needham discusses everything healthcare. I'm your host, Shawn Needham, along with my wonderful wife, Janet, and we are streaming live from the Team Needham Abode podcast studio, and we are super excited to have Gabrielle Traub on our podcast today. We actually met her at the Maha Ball a few weeks ago in Washington, D.C., and we are so excited that we could get her on the podcast to talk about homeopathy. Gabrielle, welcome to our show.
Thank you so much, Shawn and Janet, for having me on here. I'm so happy to share what I'm most passionate about.
Well, we're happy to have you on and hear about what you have to share. So tell us about a little bit about the history of what you got into what got you into homeopathy.
Yeah, so my brother was given a medication when he was 2 years old, and he had an allergic reaction, and he actually died from it. And this was a medication that was prescribed to him. And then fast forward many years later, my other brother, my living brother at the time, the same thing happened. He got sick. The doctor prescribed an antibiotic, and we found his like little body unconscious and blue. And I will never forget my mom screaming as we called the ambulance, and the paramedics, thank God, were able to resuscitate him. But at that point, my parents lost all trust in the medical system. You know, these were medications the doctor prescribed, was supposed to be safe, and it wasn't safe for our family. And my parents were looking for an alternative, and they discovered homeopathy. And homeopathy is what I was raised on. That was our normal for me. And we have a homeopathic remedy for pretty much everything. In fact, I have a 11-year-old child, and my child always says to me, "Mom, how do people do it without homeopathy? Like, how do you raise your children? How do you raise your families?" And the thing is, I said to him, "Well, sometimes regular families need to take a lot of medication." And he says, "Well, doesn't that suppress the immune system? How do they get the training that they need to be healthy and thrive?" And so homeopathy is just a different model. We use homeopathic medicines that are all made from nature. We have medicines that are made from plants, a lot of plant-based minerals, sometimes animal-based, and they are very, very gentle. We use tiny, tiny amounts, and they help to strengthen our immune system. They try to elicit an immune response. Now, homeopathy actually comes from Germany. It was a German physician, Dr. Samuel Hahnemann, and he became very disillusioned by medicine at the time. In those days, they were giving leeches and high doses of mercury. And in many cases, patients would actually get sicker from the treatment. Like the cure cannot be worse than the disease, right? And he
Gee,
became
does this sound familiar? Right?
so he became very disillusioned, and he was brilliant. I mean, he was an absolute genius. He could speak multiple languages, and he started translating medical journals where he found a cure for malaria using Peruvian bark, which is cinchona. And he found this was very, very interesting. How can a cure for malaria be cinchona? Because cinchona causes malaria-like symptoms. And so he was fascinated by this. And then he discovered the quote by Hippocrates that there are two ways of treatment, the law of opposites and the law of similars. And we see that many medicines, as pharmacists, I'm sure you know this well, that medicines can have a biphasic action on the body depending on how you give them. So if we give Ritalin to a regular person, it's a stimulant. It's like meth, pretty much. It will like speed them up. But when we give them to a child who's hyperactive or an adult who's hyperactive, it slows them down. So medicines can have this opposite effect depending on how you give them. And this is how homeopathy works. So, for example, we give a homeopathic remedy called coffea cruda that's made from coffee to patients sometimes when they have difficulty sleeping. And that may sound absurd. Why would you give coffee to someone who has difficulty sleeping? But it's the way we give it. So homeopathic medicines are ultra diluted. So really we're looking at nanoparticles of the substance. And not only did Hahnemann find that it reduced the side effects, because frankly, a lot of the homeopathic remedies we use in their crude form are poisonous. We use things like belladonna and arsenic. But homeopathic remedies actually have the safest profile of any medicine because of these really tiny nanoparticles, these nanodoses that we're using. And it's very interesting because besides from things like maybe digestive enzymes, almost every way that the body regulates itself is using tiny, tiny doses. So when we look at our endocrine system, our hormones, these are all tiny, tiny doses. Even, when we release immunoglobulins and, all the way the body communicates and regulates itself is always these tiny, tiny doses. So when we give a homeopathic remedy, we're giving medicine in a language that the body understands. It's really, really gentle. I have been fortunate enough to actually attend the childbirth of some of my patients, and we will often give babies that are just born a homeopathic remedy to help if it was a traumatic birth or if they're having difficulty breathing or whatever. And it's completely safe for newborn babies, for the elderly. We give it to plants, we give it to animals. This is the way that we know it's not just a placebo, because many, many organic farmers in the United States and worldwide use homeopathic medicines, and we find that it reduces mastitis in cows. So if an organic farmer has to give cows antibiotics, they can't use all that milk has to be thrown
Right.
out. So it's very much more profitable for them to use homeopathy, and then they don't need to, these days we're killing all the chickens. We're killing all the chickens because of bird flu. If one chicken in a whole area has bird flu, they just kill them all. They don't think about, well, maybe the ones that are healthy are developing immunity and resistance, and these could be strong and resilient against bird flu. No, we just kill them all. So with homeopathy, we work at strengthening the immune system. And what we find actually in children who grow up with homeopathy, they have a more appropriate immune response. They tend to not get sick as often. And when they get sick, they don't have such a high fever. Their immune response, we want a fever. When somebody gets sick, a fever is the best thing we have at fighting a virus or a bacteria. But we don't want the fever to be too high otherwise, because that can cause, harm. And so we find that these children that are raised with homeopathy, they need far less medication, like barely any medication often at all, except for very rare instances. They are behaviorally better adjusted. They tend to grow taller. They are more resilient. They go through puberty more easily without as much, disruption. The homeopathic remedy touches all aspects of ourselves. It touches our pathology as well. But as you know, being healthy is not just getting rid of symptoms of the absence of disease. What we're looking for as a homeopath is we're looking for vibrant health. We're looking for a sharp mind. We're looking for resilience. We're looking for like strengthening the whole person so that they can be the best version of themselves that they can be. That's what we want from our patients, to function for the remedies to touch them both physically, mentally, emotionally, the whole person. This truly is a whole person approach. And when we give a homeopathic remedy, this is the hard part about homeopathy. It's like trying to find the needle in the haystack. We're trying to find one remedy, ideally, that can help the whole person. So you're not just, in medicine, it's so kind of divided. If you have a
Yeah.
skin condition, you get sent to a dermatologist. If you have a stomach condition, you send to a gastroenterologist. If you have depression, you get sent to a psychiatrist. We see everything is interconnected, and like now that we understand the gut microbiome, we see that what's going in the gut affects the metabolism, that affects our hormones, that affects our mental and emotional state. You cannot separate all that out. So in homeopathy, we try to like step back and look at the whole picture and look at for the root cause. Likewise, we are not in homeopathy, we try to regulate and address the root cause so that you don't need to constantly be taking a homeopathic remedy for the rest of your life. Often, with even sometimes with herbal medicine or supplements, or it's specifically with allopathic medicine, and that terms means like conventional treatment. Once you stop the drug, your symptoms return. That's not really addressing the root cause.
Right.
In homeopathy, we try to help gently nudge our, we have a term called the vital force. And the reason why I prefer this term versus the immune system is it's not just the immune system, it's all the regulatory mechanisms in our body that help us to be healthy and vibrant and alive. If once you die, you no longer have a vital force. The remedies really work on that level to try to actually correct the subtle imbalances that occur so that your body, your mind can function better without constantly needing to pop a pill. That's what we're looking for in homeopathy. And it's hard. It's hard, honestly, to find just that one remedy and just the perfect dosage. It can take time. So homeopathic treatments, certainly in acute situations, can sometimes be very quick. Like, especially if I find this when I've been working with my patients for a while, they become more and more responsive. Like, and I get better at, knowing what they need and dosing and everything. When you work with a homeopath for a while, it gets easier to determine the right balance. But they become more responsive as well. So sometimes in an acute situation, I mean, I remember my mom was babysitting my child one day and he had a fever, and she said, "I don't have any Tylenol." I said, "No, don't give Tylenol, give this homeopathic remedy." And it brought down the fever so quickly. Like, she said, "Wow, that worked way faster than a Tylenol ever could." Sometimes it's really fast. But in many times, especially when we're treating chronic disease, treatment can take time. And we want our patients to be patient because we're looking at addressing the root cause and really fixing the problem instead of just patching it up and suppressing the symptoms. So that was a much longer explanation than you were
No,
asking.
that was a great explanation, great introduction, great explanation. Janet, what questions do you have for Gabrielle?
Well, I think for most people, especially in the world we're living in, homeopathy has been given a bad name. And I
Mm,
feel like that has happened maybe for the last 3 decades or maybe longer. So, can you speak to that a little bit? Because, being
yeah.
inside the industry of, or inside the profession you are in, you see what's been pushed against your way of practicing healing. So, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, there's actually a long history in that. And
Yeah.
actually, so I'm from South Africa originally. And after I left South Africa, I worked in the UK in London for a while before moving to the United States. And it was quite shocking, actually, arriving in the United States and coming from South Africa, where homeopathy is very much integrated in the medical system. And then I went to London, where the royal family very much advocate for homeopathy. And then coming to the United States, it was quite a shock that people didn't really know what homeopathy was. I came from a culture where if you were a homeopath, that was like a really noble profession. And people saying, "What is homeopathy? Is it aromatherapy? Is it herb?"
Right.
Like, no, not even knowing anything at all. And it was so shocking to me, in fact, that I then went on and established an international organization where we created a World Homeopathy Awareness Week, and we still practice that in 46 countries around the world in April, from 10 to April 10 to the 16th, just to create awareness around homeopathy. But back to your question, homeopathy has a long history of very, very much an antagonistic history with the American Medical Association. Homeopathy is the second most used form a system of medicine in the world. So worldwide, it is very, very much used. And the reality is that homeopathic medicines are all made from nature. You cannot patent a homeopathic remedy. There's no money to be made in homeopathic remedies. In fact, if you buy a remedy over the counter, it's like $8. It's so
Right.
cheap.
Right.
Um, and the reality is that, as I said, it's the second most commonly used medicine. And they've actually done studies to show that people who use homeopathy use far fewer allopathic conventional drugs. So it is. It was, it's really interesting. I've been practicing for a very long time, and I've seen like a lot of my tools slowly get eroded. So, we had a really, really good medicine that helped for anxiety that was almost like a homeopathic version of Xanax. And then that got pulled from the market, even though it had like amazing safety profile. And then we had a really good medicine that really helped with cervical dysplasia, HPV. And then that got pulled from the market with no reason. All the homeopathic eye drops have been pulled from the market. So anytime there's like a competitive element with
Yeah. Right.
allopathic medication, it really is a threat. And you may see homeopathy as like this really fringe medicine, but on a global level, a lot of people use homeopathy. And as I said, then they require fewer medication. But even in the so there was one time in American history where homeopathy just flourished, and the AMA was very threatened by homeopaths, and they actually forced the closure of all the homeopathic medical schools, and it became illegal at one time to practice homeopathy. So there's been very much a suppression of homeopathy, and we've been kind of labeled as these quacks, that there's nothing there, that this is just placebo, it's all in our minds. In fact, Luc Montagnier, who was the Nobel laureate, are you familiar with him? Amazing man. He
No.
was actually received a Nobel Award for discovering the link between HIV and AIDS. Very esteemed scientist, brilliant man. I actually met him, which was one of the highlights of my career. Um, and he then actually got really into homeopathy, and he actually found a plausible mechanism of how homeopathy works. He actually did all this amazing research in equatorial Africa, and he developed these machines, this equipment to actually detect ultra diluted doses of homeopathic medicines and differentiate them from others. And he actually had to do this in equatorial Africa because his equipment was so sensitive that any noise from like cell phones, Wi-Fi's could actually sometimes interfere. And as soon as he started to talk about and speak out about homeopathy, then suddenly he went from this esteemed scientist to a quack. They really just then disputed anything he said. But he actually published, I can give you the links to those, really like very plausible explanations of
Yeah.
how these ultra diluted, we have to remember that we base when there's nothing left in the substance on Avogadro. Avogadro was a 1700 scientist, and that is long, we're using science that is largely outdated. So yeah, I think that's very much why homeopathy has been suppressed in the United States, especially.
Follow the money,
Yeah,
essentially.
yeah.
So tell us about the movie that's coming out.
Okay, this movie I'm so proud of, and I'm so proud to be part of it. It's a movie called Introducing Homeopathy. And Introducing Homeopathy, I am in the film together with 5 of my patients, and the type of patients that are, and as well as many of the doctors and research scientists. The movie is brilliantly produced. Kimalia was the producer. And initially, they approached me to ask me if I had any patients who would be willing to be in the film. And at first, I was a little hesitant to ask my patients just because it's such a personal experience. But we actually ended up, so many of my patients wanted to be in the film. In fact, we have hundreds of hours of footage, and it was very hard to choose which patient stories to use. But in the film, we try to cover like all the things that are wrong with our medical system and patients who are not getting help. So we have one child with autism and seizures. We have a patient with a mental illness. He has bipolar and addictions. We had a patient with HIV. We have a woman who had PCOS and was difficulty getting pregnant, and then she obviously got pregnant in the film. And so we have all these patient stories, and we also have farmers talking about homeopathy use in animals. We have a story about a agility dog, so cute, that was injured, like severe reaction. And so this film was, our goal with this film is for people who are either disillusioned with the medical system or not finding answers, or who are lost, or just kind of, on this cycle of take this medication, which will cause a whole slew of side effects, and then take these medications to help the side effects of those medications. You just kind of
Right.
get lost in the medical system, to let them know that there is another way. There is a way, like, because so many people, they don't get. I have a very high percentage of medical professionals in my practice, so I get a lot of referrals from other doctors, and I have a lot of my own patients are doctors. But most of the time, even the ones that are my patients, they have to be very careful to recommend homeopathy because it's not considered the gold standard. And so doctors don't often tell patients about homeopathy. They don't tell them about, if this isn't working, try this. Have you considered something like this? Now, interestingly, in countries like France, a lot of doctors refer to homeopathy. I think over 60% of doctors refer to homeopathy, but it's just not like that here in the United States. So we want to tell patients, tell the public about another way, something that to consider as a possibility. If, medicine isn't working for you, we have the sickest society that we have ever had. The amount of chronic
Right.
disease, the amount of illness in children, it's out of control. This is unacceptable. And the amount of children on prescription medication that they'll have to be on for the rest of their lives, this is not acceptable. We have to find another way. And I feel that homeopathy is one of the things that can be helpful in this situation. Um,
So
so yeah,
when should we expect the movie to come out?
Okay, so this is the exciting part. So we actually have a screening on Children's Health Defense on February 17th. They're going to be two live viewings of it at 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Shawn, I sent you the link. It is free. Like, this is free. You don't have to pay. It's free to the public, but you do have to register. And we're so excited about this. We are hoping for over 1 million people to see the film. And then we also in negotiation with, sorry, it's the other link. This is my website link, Shawn.
Oh,
It is
okay.
the Children's Health Defense. This is my personal website. So we are also in negotiation with Netflix. And what Netflix is interested in is like a mini series. So not the film as a whole, but we have so much footage. And we feel like the stories of the patients and the explanations from the experts in the film are so compelling. We just want to kind of plant a seed for people to think, maybe there's something to this homeopathy. Maybe this is something that I should consider or be open-minded to. And it's it is. I've had so many patients like call me since the film, and I cannot handle all the patients. So we are, we are trying to let all of the homeopaths in the United States and worldwide know that there will be an influx of patients desperate to get healing because they are sick and fed up with the medical system. Our only concern is, will we have enough homeopaths to help
Right.
everyone? Yeah.
So tell us on that note, tell us about your book too, so we can learn more about that.
Yeah, so I've published two books. One was a collaborative book on fertility. I worked in a traditional OBGYN clinic for over a decade with a traditional OBGYN and a fertility endocrinologist. And so I have a lot of experience in the field of women's health. And and so my book Infertility I was actually asked to write a collaborative book with a group of female authors, all like looking at infertility from a different modality perspective. And I wrote the section on homeopathy. And then probably my favorite book that I've written is the Live Right for Your Remedy Type. So in addition to homeopathy, I'm very enthusiastic about diet and lifestyle. But what I find is like diet recommendations are always changing, and doctors tend to recommend the diet and lifestyle that work for them. And in
Mm,
Ayurveda, for
mm,
example, we have this understanding that you fit three doshas, Vata, Pitta, Kapha, and they give recommendations for your dosha, which is quite complicated and time consuming to follow. what I discovered through many, many years of practice and looking at all the literature is that we can actually super really, really refine that and individualize recommendations based on somebody's homeopathic remedy type. We have over 6,000 homeopathic remedies. In the book, I describe 21 of the most common remedy types and what is going to be the best for their type. Not what's best for me, but what is best for that individual at that time in their lives. So, for example, we have a homeopathic remedy type called pulsatilla that has difficulty emulsifying fats because their gallbladder isn't working very well. So, whenever they eat fats, they actually get stomach aches and problems, but at the same time, they have problems with their hormones, and their hormones need fats to be able to produce the proper amount of hormones for them. And so we talk about what is going to be the best fats for them and which is the best diet for them. They tend to be thirstless, they don't drink enough water, and they are susceptible to urinary tract infections and so I go into great detail for every remedy type, what to eat, what exercise to do, how to do it, what lifestyle modifications are best for you. I also look at relationships. What is it like to be in a relationship with that type and how to make that relationship successful? And also in child rearing and parenting. If you have a child of this type, what is the most important thing to parent on? So it's probably first of all, it is the only homeopathic lifestyle guide. I spent over 10 years writing this book and I really gave it it was like my baby. I really put everything into it. But it really looks at how to individual lifestyle recommendations based on your remedy type. So it's very, very individualized to you. And I think it's something that I'm very proud of.
That's
And
awesome.
then
So
I,
tell us
yeah.
about your Facebook group.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, I could only, with 10 years of writing, I only created 21 types. The goal of the Facebook group was to have a conversation about other homeopaths and just the general public of how we can individualize other types, the ones that weren't covered in my book. It hasn't really morphed into that. It's become more of just a community discussion group and talking about homeopathy in general, but it's a wonderful place to be. I think you can learn a lot. I try to post any relevant information that's going on. For example, we had the fires here in California. I
Mhm.
actually went up to LA to work in clinics to help the firefighters. So I posted about, what remedies you could use if there are wildfires in this area, which can support your lungs, which can help with fear and trauma and all that. So I try to post pertinent things to what's going on during flu season, what to take. So it's just a really fun group that everybody is welcome to join.
Awesome. So as we wrap this podcast up, Gabrielle, tell us what you have a passion for.
Can you not tell? Is it not obvious?
Right? Right.
Yeah. So I'm passionate in making a difference in the world. I really feel like there's so much that can help people to be more vibrant, to be healthier. And there are choices. I'm passionate about healthy lifestyle. I'm passionate about creating health, which will ultimately create freedom and liberation for us. We are so often stuck in our disease. And I want to help people to overcome that, to feel free, to feel more vibrant. And hopefully, I can make a difference in some small way in people's lives by doing
Well,
this work.
I think you are already. You definitely are. So, and I appreciate you being on our podcast and helping us realize our goal, which is to
Thank you.
educate and empower individuals to take charge of their own health. So, thank you for being on today.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful for being here and for everything that both of you are doing, the wonderful work you're doing.
And your website's pretty easy, san-diego-homeopathy.com. If they have any questions, we're streaming it right there. You have a phone number and your website. They can reach out to you. Thank you so much for being on, Gabrielle.
Thank you. So
And,
blessed.
and we're going to be in San Diego in September. Hopefully, we can meet you in person.
Yes, please. That would be great to see you again. Yeah, you
Yeah,
have my number.
yeah, I sure do. So, and listeners and viewers, thank you for tuning in to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. Tune in to our regularly scheduled podcast Monday, 12:30 to 1:30 Pacific Standard Time. We will have Dr. Kelly Victory on our show to discuss how Our immune systems are enough usually to treat most bacteria and viruses. You don't want to miss out on that. Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. Thank you.